Team go. Hello, my name is Goldtooth. I am an organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I want to welcome you to the first People's Assembly on BlackRock. I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to have been asked to be your MC for this event, and I'm going to try to do my very best to help us get through today's program. Today's program is going to be roughly an hour and a half. And so really I want to say thank you for setting some time aside in your day to learn more about this company, BlackRock, and how we are trying to push it in the right direction. And also an opportunity for us to hear directly from folks who are involved in the frontline fight to protect Mother Earth and to protect traditional territories of Indigenous peoples across the planet. So this is a People's Assembly on BlackRock. Why a People's Assembly? Well, BlackRock, if most folks don't know it, is the world's largest asset manager. It's handling over $7.4 trillion in customer assets. It's got offices in 30 countries across the world, clients in hundreds of countries. It's the largest, it's the biggest investor in fossil fuels and other companies who are driving deforestation on the planet. And it's a major shareholder in most other companies who have tremendous power and influence over how this economic system is run. BlackRock is also a public company, meaning it sells shares to the public individuals, people can buy shares of this company, which means they have to have an annual general meeting where those shareholders are allowed to come together and make noise about what the company has done, as well as future plans for this company. BlackRock's AGM, the annual general meeting, is tomorrow. But because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, they're not having it in person. It's going to be a virtual meeting. So there won't be the same opportunity to raise our voices in person. Many of the people you'll be hearing from today would have gone to the meeting directly to demand action from its leadership. But again, because of the pandemic, they don't have that choice. And so we decided to step up and create this space right here called the People's Assembly. I think something has to be really known, and I'm going to put this out there. I didn't know about who BlackRock was even a year ago or a year and a half ago. It was just it's an ominous name, but I didn't know who they were. And I think they actually like to keep it that way. But BlackRock is part money manager, part institutional investor. It also has a software program, software platform, and it's also partly a government partner. In March, because of the coronavirus, it was hired by the United States government to manage the multiple debt buying programs on behalf of the United States Central Bank as a part of the bailout effort in response to the coronavirus. BlackRock secured at the same time a contract with the European Commission to advise on a project to integrate climate change into the Environmental Union's banking regulation. It's also managing U.S. securities purchases for the Central Bank of Israel. And in Mexico, BlackRock handles the country's pension funds while also owning the companies that they invest in. So what we come to realize in this campaign, in this fight, is that we can't address the climate crisis without big changes at BlackRock. Today, we're going to hear from Indigenous and community leaders and organizations who are directly impacted by BlackRock's investments. We're also going to hear about what they are doing, about it. We're also going to hear from elected officials and national figures about the challenges and opportunities they see influencing BlackRock. But one thing to remember through today is that we know that it's going to take each and every one of us to do this work. And we have actions that you can take. You're sitting at home right now, or wherever you are, watching through your computer, your cell phone. There's an opportunity for you to help in this fight. And we want to provide that pathway for you. We're going to start with some testimonies from the front lines and organizations who are helping frontline communities. And then we're going to take a minute to take action together. Again, the BlackRock's annual general meeting is tomorrow. So it's a great chance to hold the company accountable for its climate promises. So we're going to walk you through something quick and effective, something really interactive to put pressure on this company. And then finally, after all that, we're thrilled to welcome Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, Congressman Chuy García from Illinois, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, and writer, activist, and 350.org founder Bill McKibben at the tail end of this call. But I want to just stop there, just a little bit of housekeeping. You're encouraged to write any questions that you have in the Q&A chat box. So a part of Zoom, there's a little chat box. You can leave questions in there. We have a number of moderators who are watching that throughout the event. So if you're in there, make sure you type in your name, your preferred pronouns, and where you're messaging from if you haven't already. And the other thing is, on your screen, if you're on a computer, in the upper right corner, we want to encourage you to switch the view from gallery view to speaker view. That way, you can see us front and center and everyone that's talking. And we're going to be showing a number of videos later on. And so you can get a prime seat to see that. So make sure you change the setting from gallery view and make sure it's set on speaker view. So that's it. To start us off, I want to show you a video to tell you more about BlackRock in this campaign, how we got here, and what we want to do. So sit tight and we'll be right back.
Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, a $7 trillion investment firm, said that his company will now make investment decisions based in part on a company's commitment to environmental sustainability. That's a very big deal.
Communities and everything that we hold dear.
time we are done, the word BlackRock will be the very image of filthy, toxic, and unethical investment. So if we're not going to hear from any BlackRock senior management, any employees who want to come and talk to us, our only remaining option is disruption.
We're having investors who are focusing on more sustainable strategies.
From BlackRock this morning, the company's CEO, Larry Fink's annual letter is out.
We believe in most cases fossil fuels will not be a good investment.
Boards will now ask CEOs what they're doing to help save the planet.
We did make a statement that coal is not a good investment now. And I believe this is going to be a really major change in how we all do business.
What the banks have done to me. What
the banks have gone to be. This is what democracy looks like.
Infrastructure!
This is what democracy looks like!
I know what democracy looks like!
This is what democracy looks like!
So that is a little video about the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign. As you saw in the video, this campaign to move capital investing in climate destruction, it's working. You know, we've been able to rattle the cage of sorts to get this economic system, to hold this economic system accountable for the climate chaos that we're seeing all across this planet. Due to all the work of frontline communities, organizations, national and local, who have put pressure on BlackRock, took to the streets, the company has said that it will put climate at the center of its investment strategy. But so far, we haven't really seen them live up to their words. You know, words are nice, but if there's no action, no change, it's just hot air. So we want to talk about real life and how these financial decisions made by BlackRock are actually impacting our communities. But I want to take a little pause and just let you know a little bit about who I am. I didn't introduce myself. I introduced my name, but I didn't really tell you who I am. Again, my name is Goldtooth. I'm a Dakota and Dene man that grew up in the traditional territories of Dakota peoples in what is now called Minnesota, within the colony of the United States of America. I'm the Keep It in the Ground campaigner for the Indigenous Environmental Network. Our network is a grassroots network of Indigenous communities who are fighting for environmental justice and the protection of our inherent rights. The communities I often work with are on both ends of experiencing climate change. We have communities who are at the source of fossil fuel extraction, who are dealing with all forms of extractive development. But we also have communities who are being directly affected by climate chaos and climate change with sea level rise, temperature changes, disruption of animal habitats, and just general disruption of their original teachings. And what we've come to learn in this fight to protect Mother Earth is that it's not just a matter of holding the oil and fossil fuel companies accountable who are digging in our backyards, who are digging up our land, who are putting our communities at risk accountable. It's also holding the financiers, the companies and people who are giving money to the oil and fossil fuel companies. We have to hold them just as accountable. Because it's not just, you know, the actual oil companies who are threatening our way of life. It's not just fossil fuel companies who are threatening our way of life. It's the people giving the money who are also threatening indigenous lifeways. And we've come to learn that it's not just these corporations who are threatening the planet. It's the entire economic system that is threatening our way of life on this planet. And what institution is the proverbial foundation of this economic system? BlackRock. BlackRock's actions and actions affect each and every one of us, but I want to say it's especially affecting indigenous communities in all places on this planet. I want to bring just quick attention to the current struggle for the protection of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge up in what is so-called Alaska. You have Gwich'in and Inupiaq peoples who are protecting one of the last wild places in the Western Hemisphere from oil development. Oil companies like British Petroleum, Exxon Mobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips all want access to this pristine land for oil development, And who is one of the largest shareholders in each and every one of these companies? BlackRock. So it's absolutely essential that we have to influence this institution, hold it accountable for its own words by saying that they're going to take into account climate change into its investment strategies. And so it's really about taking those strong steps forward, holding them accountable, and protecting those communities who are on the front line. So I want to bring in some other voices from other communities who are experiencing some of the effects of BlackRock's anti-climate investments. So we're going to be going to a good sister coming for us from New York, Rachel Rivera. So Rachel, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, again, my name is Rachel Rivera. I am a member of New York Communities for Change. To talk about myself and how this affected me, let's go back to Hurricane Sandy. During Hurricane Sandy, my daughter Marisol at the time was about 5-6 years old. We was not considered in the red zone. So I was a normal night watching the news, everything else. I heard a loud cracking sound coming from my ceiling. I got scared. I went and I grabbed my daughter off her bed. As soon as I grabbed her off her bed, my ceiling caved in onto her bed. From there, we lost everything. We lost memorabilia, family pictures, everything. We started from zero. We lost even family pets that passed away from that incident. We lived a nightmare for about 2 years afterwards. Didn't know what's gonna happen. And BlackRock fund a lot of the issues that caused this climate crisis that we lived in now. A lot of people in New York lost their homes and everything else in the Far Rockaways, in Canarsie, and there's still people struggling behind it. My daughter still has nightmares to this day. She is 14 years old now, and she still has nightmares from Sandy. We both suffer from PTSD because of this, and BlackRock needs to know how their funding all these fossil fuels is destroying us. They are also known to fund a factory that is next to the New York's largest housing system, which they consider that asthma alley. The air quality around those housing projects in Queens is so poor that people have asthma. My sister's kids were born sick from those projects. Thankfully, she's not there no more, but they're still sick. And it's not right that BlackRock is funding $300 million on power plants just like that. And they're not realizing how much damage they're doing on communities of low income, poor people of the Black and brown communities, which it's hard. And I am a Latina. I am also Indigenous. I am a Taína, so it is hard for me to see my own people getting sick, especially now with this coronavirus. The city, de Blasio stated, where the area I'm in is one of the highest infected area for the coronavirus. So it's right now I'm stuck at home. My kids are stuck at home. We're doing the mobile learning, and I'm trying my best to do what I could do. And my 14-year-old is also the youngest climate activist, and I allow her to tell BlackRock, it's time to clean up your act. It's time to wake up and realize what is going to happen if they could live a month in our shoes. Let's try it. But
Rachel,
yes.
Thank you so much for the words that you're sharing, and much love to also your community, but also to the work that you're doing to uplift the next generation of organizers and your young one there. We have to go. We're going to go over to our next relative. Thank you, Rachel, for your words and sharing with us.
Thank you.
I want to bring Richie Harding into this space. Richie is going to be coming to us, and I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your community.
Hello, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Richie Harding. I'm from Northampton County, North Carolina. It's a small, high poverty area right off of Interstate 95 near the Virginia border. One of the things that we have experienced here is we had a wood pellet company in Viva come in several years ago, and we have a lot of tree destruction that is going on. It's a high industry, a heavy industry operation that's actually in a light industry zone. And what that means is when you have a heavy industry, there are a lot of different things that can go on. With light industry, all of your manufacturing must occur indoors. You can store things outside, but you can't do anything outside with it. Well, their first step is debarking of the trees, which creates a lot of noise, for a several mile radius. And you also have a lot of dust. It's a real nuisance. The county commissioners that we had, the former county commissioners we had, they were a part of them coming in into an area that wasn't zoned for them. But we had to vote to get them out, and now we're still dealing with the issues of having this facility here.
Can you share? Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. And BlackRock is one of those investments in this, right, as well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm learning that now. I'm like you. I wasn't really aware of, how they were really like the back office for a lot of these things that's going on. And when you have these things happen, there's a lot of different things that go on within the communities that you never hear about.
Richard, thank you very much for sharing your words. And I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time to hear more about it. But I think what Richard and Rachel have brought to this space is just to demonstrate that this company is worldwide, and it's affecting folks that live in the country to folks that live right in the city. And it has embedded itself across this entire system. I want to go to hear some of our relatives to the South. In the global South, I've worked many times with a lot of indigenous relatives, folks who live down in the Amazon. The Amazon has been told to be like one of the lungs of Mother Earth, the lungs of this planet. And I actually like to add to that, you know how in the human body, there's always pairs. Like you have one lung on one side and you have the other lung on the other side. I've heard some relatives in the far north who live in the boreal forests of the Northern Hemisphere saying, well, the Amazon is one side of the lung, the boreal forest is the other side, and together we're connected to give life to this planet. So let's go to the Amazon right now and take some time to learn about how they are being affected by the investments of BlackRock. BlackRock is one of the largest drivers of Amazon forest destruction. It's heavily invested in both fossil fuel companies as well as companies that contribute to deforestation directly in the entire region. BlackRock has no accountability measures for deforestation in place. It has failed to make any commitments to address its ties to Amazon crude extraction or deforestation. So I want to go to a video that we have of a good relative who's going to be with us, who's going to be speaking about according to research from environmental advocacy group Amazon Watch, BlackRock has invested in the agribusiness firms JBS, Minerva, Marfing, Bunge, and ADM. All of these companies, like I mentioned before, are directly tied to deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. And it's endangering not only the plethora of biodiversity in animals and plants there, but it's directly threatening the lives of indigenous peoples. Eloy Terena is a human rights lawyer with the Association of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, called APIB, and member of the Indigenous Terena community in Brazil. Indigenous peoples in Brazil are calling for an end to the profit-driven destruction of the Amazon. Mr. Terena is going to tell us a bit about what folks on the ground in Brazil are dealing with right now. Let's go to Eloy Terena.
indígena do povo Terena e sou advogado da Articulação dos Povos Indígenas do Brasil, a PIB. Eu estou aqui para falar da situação dos direitos dos povos indígenas no Brasil e a importância de preservar os territórios tradicionais. Neste contexto de pandemia do coronavírus, torna-se necessário refletir sobre a importância dos territórios indígenas no equilíbrio da humanidade. Para nós, povos indígenas, é importante repensar o modelo de desenvolvimento econômico que respeite os direitos indígenas e respeite o meio ambiente. Por isso, é fundamental que a BlackRock pare com o desmatamento na Amazônia brasileira e respeite as vidas indígenas. No Brasil, nós estamos vivendo sob o contexto do governo Bolsonaro, o maior inimigo dos povos indígenas e das comunidades tradicionais. Muitas leis estão sendo criadas para facilitar a exploração das terras indígenas. Nossas lideranças indígenas estão protegendo as suas terras com a própria vida. Por isso, é preciso parar o genocídio indígena no Brasil.
Thank you so much to Mr. Terena for giving us those words. So we just heard from how BlackRock is impacting the Amazon in Brazil, but if you don't know, the Amazon is massive and it's also in other countries as well. So I want to hear a little bit more about some of the work that's happening on the other end of the Amazon forest. So we're going to be joined by Leila Salazar Lopez, the Executive Director of Amazon Watch, an advocacy organization that partners with indigenous communities in the Amazon. So I'm gonna go to Leila. Leila, are you there?
Hi, Dallas. Good morning, everyone. Saying hello from Ohlone territory here in the Bay Area.
I'm so happy
California.
You could be here with us, Leila. It's good to see you. I know Leila for a number of years now. Can you tell us a little bit about the struggles that the indigenous communities in the Western Amazon are facing right now, and how is BlackRock involved in a lot of that?
Yes, the situation all across the Amazon is very serious. It's a crisis. It's a state of emergency right now with COVID-19. But before COVID-19, there was already a crisis. There's a climate crisis. There's a biodiversity crisis. And in the Western Amazon, the fossil fuel industry in particular, the crude oil extraction is what's causing, it's what has caused for decades and currently continuing to cause intense struggle in indigenous communities and also resistance.
And as it comes to BlackRock, what are communities calling for, and what actions should BlackRock take as a financier of oil companies that's operating within their territories?
Yeah, I'll just add to the other questions. I failed to mention that when I say, climate crisis, you all should know that just in the last couple months, there have been very clear examples of the climate crisis in the Amazon, where our really close allies, the Quechua, Sarayaku, and the Zapata live in the Ecuadorian Amazon. There have been massive historic rains and floods like they've never seen before. The elders and the grandparents say they've never seen these kinds of floods. 4 floods just in the last 2 months. And they say this is because of the climate crisis. On top of that, massive oil spills that they have never seen before in decades. And what's BlackRock's involvement in all of this? Well, BlackRock is the major financier of the fossil fuel industry and the deforestation commodity companies in the Amazon. We just released a report in March, and what we found was that BlackRock has $2.5 billion invested in just 3 oil companies that are directly operating or want to operate in the Amazon: Geopark, Frontera, Andes Petroleum. And all of these companies are violating Indigenous rights by trying to go in or already in the Amazon without the free, prior, and informed consent of communities. And while they're also, as mentioned, as Eloy Terena mentioned, not only is this company investing billions in fossil fuel expansion and extraction, they're also invested in agribusiness companies. These companies like JBS and Minerva and Bunge and Marfrig and ADM, these are the companies that, you know, promoted the expansion of agribusiness in the Brazilian Amazon and the deforestation, which led to the unprecedented and horrible fires across the Amazon last year.
Sorry, I was muted. Leila, thank you so much for highlighting the issues that are affecting folks in the Western Amazon. And thank you to the tremendous work of Amazon Watch for uplifting those voices and helping get the message out there about what people can do. We've learned about what's happening in the Amazon, and now we're going to transition over to hear from the frontline communities fighting extraction in Liberia. Ali Kaba is with the Sustainable Development Institute in Liberia, and we're going to go and hear some more words from Ali.
SDR. My name is Ali Kaba. I work with the Sustainable Development Institute, that's SDR. SDR is a local NGO working in Liberia. We work with communities to protect their rights to the land and natural resources. Over the years, GBL, that's Golden Valerium, Liberia, have been operating in community forests in Liberia. And over the periods, we've witnessed abuses against communities. We witnessed deforestation. We witnessed destructions of community livelihoods, of community forest. We've witnessed destruction of cultural sites, displacements of communities, affecting community food sources, and creating conflict within communities and between communities. And so we are asking GBL and its investor, BlackRock, to make sure that they do respect their own commitments to international principles, their commitment to FPIC, that's the free, prior, informed consent, to make sure communities are properly informed and communities have time to make decisions, to agree to sharing the land with GBL or not to share the land with GBL. We appeal to BlackRock to make sure that GBL is respecting the rights of communities. And we are afraid that if GBL does not respect the rights of communities, BlackRock will not be only implicated in the abuse of human rights and deforestation, but they may not likely achieve the investment goal of profit making. With tensions in communities, GBL cannot operate in peace in these communities.
Thank you very much to Ali for sharing that story and talking to us about the impacts that BlackRock has in Liberia. You know, this is all about action. It's all about putting our words and putting our energy into action, put pressure, and we're almost close to there, almost close to the point where we collectively, you watching right now, are gonna help us put some pressure on BlackRock. But first, I wanna bring in a youth leader, Carrie Ramirez. Carrie, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Carrie, you're a youth leader with Youth versus Apocalypse, right?
Yeah, hi Dallas, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about just what's the group you work with, where are you based, and what's the struggle you're experiencing as a youth organizer and how BlackRock is involved in that?
So my name is Carrie Ramirez. I am with Youth versus Apocalypse. I am 18 years old, or 19, I just turned 19, sorry. And We are based in the Bay Area on occupied Ohlone land, and we are primarily frontline youth of color, primarily Black and brown youth of color, and underprivileged in some cases. So we are all frontline community members with white and privileged allies who are, of course, in YVA. We have in the past organized protests in San Francisco with around 30,000 people showing up to our September 20th protests. And I am one of the, I am kind of like the head of the Camp Rock campaign in YVA, and I keep in touch with what's BlackRock's doing, and I'm really invested in the campaign, primarily because I am I'm half Salvadorian. My father is Indigenous to El Salvador, and my mother is Filipino, and I am first-generation American. I also lived in the East Bay for a very long time, and because of this, I want to bring into the idea of human health and like the health of communities of color as a result of the climate crisis and as a result of fossil fuel extraction and coal and oil refineries, as well as the effects of climate change will have on our communities. One, I feel this damage to Indigenous communities across Turtle Island and throughout the world in a very, it's deep into my heart because it feels like an ancestral pain. And it's like, if something happens to my cousin, it hurts me as well, you know, and knowing that these communities are being ravaged by forest fires, by lack of water, you know, even in general, these human like systems of oppression that are affecting my communities and communities that aren't even in my community, but communities that I feel empathy to. And I want to bring about how coal and oil refineries affects human health because it damages the heart, damages the lungs. Oil and coal particles, the closer you live to an oil refinery, the closer you live to pollution, you're more likely to lose human like years of your life. And I don't know a lot about science, and I don't know a lot about economics, and I don't know a lot about finance, but I do know that BlackRock is the #1 investor in the fossil fuel industry, the #1 investor in deforestation, and it is also the #1 investor in private prisons that disproportionately holds Black and brown communities. And I think genuinely this is kind of colonialism and genocide to an economic form, to a systemic form. These people are getting sick. People of color are 4 times likely to have asthma. We can't drink the water because it's polluted. We cannot breathe the air because it is polluted. And we are more at risk for diseases such as COVID-19. And we are essential to our communities, and we're forced to work these low-end jobs. But we're getting sick and we're getting killed off because of these things. And we're more likely to die. And I think, I don't know, it's unfair, and it's not okay to disproportionately affect communities of color. Climate change will disproportionately affect communities of color in urban neighborhoods to Indigenous neighborhood, to Indigenous villages.
If I could add, if you had a chance to talk to the top folks at BlackRock, what would you say?
I would tell them to look at their heart and not think with their brain, which sounds insane, I know, and I know you want to think about important finances in our economy, but I want them to understand that this is all made up, that there were times where these things didn't exist, and that to put human lives in the forefront of profit, to put people in the forefront of profit, to put our earth in the forefront of profit, because it feels like we're surviving constantly. You know, we have wars that we've been in for 18 years that primarily have people of color fighting other people of color. We have diseases and pandemics that we have to live through. And then what happens in 10 years when we can't fix the climate crisis and we feel like we're surviving, and then maybe something is normal. And then we can't live in an earth that's polluted, in an earth where the permafrost melts and new diseases are introduced to our communities, where fires ravage Australia, the Amazon, and California. We can't live that way. And I want them to understand that that even though it might just be finances and profit to them, that this has a human element and that we will all be affected. And you cannot breathe money and you cannot breathe profits at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for your energy, your passion, your love for your peoples and for the land itself. Thank you very much, Carrie, for joining us. We're going to go to another relative that's coming from the Bay Area. I want to welcome Dr. Ashley McClure. Doctor, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Carrie. You said most of what I needed to say, so I'm really happy to just kind of reaffirm all of your sentiments. So,
if I could ask, what would you see as a connection of public health as it relates to climate change, and how is BlackRock involved in that?
So, of the 7 patients that I've diagnosed and treated for COVID-19 so far, all of them have been from the communities that we often call, vulnerable populations when we're talking about the health impacts of the climate crisis. The first who are among us to get sick or even die from COVID-19, like Carrie was just saying, the first who die from heat stroke when they're picking our fruits and vegetables, the first to suffer from asthma attacks from living beside the oil refineries or extraction in California and across our country. And many people in public health are describing the COVID crisis as the climate crisis on steroids because of how it magnifies vulnerability and worsens our health disparities. Harvard had a study last month to say exactly what Carrie was, that if you're exposed to higher levels of fossil fuel-related air pollution long term, you are measurably at a higher risk of dying from COVID-19. So they're absolutely interconnected. And pushing BlackRock to divest from fossil fuels so that our streets become cleaner as we transition to clean energy is going to make our health better immediately, and also improve kind of the fairness of our communities, because the fight for the clean energy transition, which everybody on this call is really inspiring me and everybody else for, is about health, and it's about fairness and equality.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for being on this call and sharing those words with us. I mean, Carrie said it. I think if you may have not noticed, to each and every one of you watching this, is that the testimonies that you're hearing from the front lines paint a clear picture that the investments of BlackRock not only is affecting the climate overall, it's not only creating greater climate chaos, but it's disproportionately putting Black and Brown and Indigenous communities at risk for death. It's putting our peoples on the chopping block for their benefit of profits. And it's time for us to step up, speak up on behalf of these communities, speak up on behalf of Mother Earth herself, and call this company out, make the changes that it needs to make. From the boroughs of New York, to the west coast of Oakland, to Liberia, to Indonesia, to the Amazon, to Alaska, our folks are rising up, our people are organizing, people are working together and really connecting the dots and saying, look, all of this is connected, this economic system is connected to our well-being, but also to the destruction of our well-being. So at this point, I want to transition over. I'm gonna bring in a prominent voice in the climate justice movement. I want to bring in Bill McKibben. Bill is a writer and activist, a founder of 350.org. So Bill, you there?
I'm here.
All right, Bill. Good to see you. I want to ask you this question. What do you think it will take to move these huge financial services firms like BlackRock to put climate at the center of their politics? What's it going to take?
That's just the right question. First of all, what a pleasure to join everybody here from Vermont, from traditional Abenaki territory. And what a pleasure to get to talk about this most important of topics. We should say, as we're talking, even as we're talking today, there are people around the world just getting hammered. Our brothers and sisters along the Bay of Bengal in India and Bangladesh are getting clobbered by a hurricane. In Michigan, there's unprecedented flooding after unprecedented rainfall. So, every day just reminds us how crucial this work is. BlackRock, you don't need to know an immense amount about finance or anything else. You need to know that BlackRock is the biggest box of money on planet Earth. big is the thing that defines it. They have trillions upon trillions of dollars, which means they're the biggest owners of almost everything. They have an unfortunate name, BlackRock. It sounds like they went and picked, they just tried to figure out how to take the dirtiest thing on earth, coal, and name themselves after it. They're been a huge funder of coal, and they are of gas and oil, and of other things that you can burn. I am so happy to see lots of people on this call who are working on the Drax plant in England. All that stuff that's getting cut down where Richie lives is getting sent from the southeast US off to the UK to be burned, all those trees. They burn more trees in that one plant than grow in the UK every year. So the thing to know about BlackRock is it's big, big, big. That means when we leverage it, it's big, 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 and people are doing that leveraging. You saw, everybody, that film with Larry Fink saying earlier this year that BlackRock was now going to take these issues with a level of seriousness. That's good. That's what happens when you organize and push. And we should say, that's what we're trying to do. We want people to come around. We want people to change. That's why we organize. So maybe to some people, it seems rude for us to be still kind of holding them to account. After all, they've said some right things now. But that's because they're new to this. Dallas and I have been working together for a long time. If Dallas promises me something, if he says, I have your back, then I never turn around. I know he's got my back. I don't worry for a minute. But we don't know that yet about BlackRock. They've said some good things, but they haven't done yet what we need them doing. That's why we're here today. So Dallas, is it okay now to sort of do that exercise that we've been thinking about calling BlackRock? Can I kind of tee that up for you?
Heck yeah, brother. Do it.
All right.
So BlackRock has said, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So I was just going to say, we're in shareholder season right now, okay? All the big companies are having their shareholder meetings. And since BlackRock owns more of the world's economy than anybody else, they're a huge presence at every single one of these meetings. Yesterday was a really important one. It was the Chase annual meeting. JP Morgan Chase is the biggest bank in the world and the biggest fossil fuel lender in the world, and BlackRock's one of their big shareholders. So in January, Larry Fink said that BlackRock was going to disclose how it voted at these meetings. We don't know yet, however, how they voted yesterday, including on the really key question of whether or not to keep Lee Raymond, who'd been the biggest climate, helped pioneer corporate climate denial in his years at Exxon. We do not know how BlackRock voted yesterday on the question of whether he should be on the board or not. They haven't disclosed it. We want them to, because we want to be able to try and sense whether they're for real or not, whether their commitments mean what they say. So here's how we're going to do this. All of you have a telephone now sitting next to you. We live in a world where everybody has a telephone on them at all times. And you got to pick it up and you got to dial these 10 numbers. 212-810-5300. You can see it there on your screen. And when the nice operator answers, just ask them to leave a message for Larry Fink. And the message is, come clean. Tell us how BlackRock voted on Lee Raymond and on other key climate resolutions at the Chase meeting yesterday. And once you've done it, tweet it out. The hashtags are BLK Big Problem, Hot Air on Climate, and make sure that you @ BlackRock when you do it. This is how we do the work of trying to hold. I mean, these guys have said that they're in this with us now, that they're concerned about climate change, that they're trying to move in the right direction. So let's find out how for real they are. This is how we hold each other accountable. So many thanks to everybody who's fighting on coal, on trees, on gas, on oil, on indigenous rights, on all the things that are at stake here. we need this to be the year when we turn this corner and turn it hard. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Bill. Just so folks, if you're watching, I made this little, is that backwards? Is that backwards? Can you read that?
Perfect.
That's 212-810-5300. We're going to give you a chance here. I know how Zoom works. If you're watching this on your phone, you can still make a phone call. It'll mute this. We're asking you to go and, as Bill had just said, call this number. Ask the operator to leave a message for Larry Fink. I know it's a funny name. It sounds like a 1980s boss name, bad guy name, but just go with it. And you have to say, leave the message and say, it's time to come clean, Larry. Tell us how BlackRock voted on Lee Raymond and other climate-related resolutions. So it's all the numbers in the chat. I'm going to be stepping away from here. Now. We're going to be transitioning into our town hall meeting, but we're going to give you about 5 minutes, maybe 5-ish minutes or more for you to make those phone calls. Get up, go to the bathroom, get some water. If your kid's running around, you can go catch your kid right now. But here's your chance to take a little break, make the phone number, tweet out the information if you can. And for me, as Dallas Goldtooth, organizer at the Indigenous Environmental Network, I want to say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on this call, for taking a step to help protect communities all across this planet who all they want is access to clean water, clean air, clean communities. They want to have access to self-determination and have the ability to determine what happens within their boundaries in their communities. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for putting pressure on BlackRock. And we'll be back. In the meantime, make the phone calls. We're going to play a music video by Youth versus Apocalypse and a spoken word piece, and we'll be back shortly. So thank you very much. See you later.
Stop it. I need to know that my voice is not screaming for help under a flooded society, that it is being heard, not just to be heard, but to be taken seriously. I need wealthy policymakers to stop putting my future up for profit. I need to know that the beautiful scenes I am privileged to witness can be admired by my grandchildren and future generations to come. I need them to stop because we sure as hell won't. La naturaleza es belleza, entonces deja que se quede así. Because to protect her is to protect us. I just need a livable future. Is that too much to ask?
Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, hey. No one is disposable. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, hey. No one is disposable.
COVID and climate change ain't far from the same. People in the margins disrespected and blamed. They put oil and gas infrastructures where we play, contaminate the land, air, and the rain. Our health in a game, our lungs are inflamed. Stuck in a cage with a severe corona case. Displaced by the climate while they profit from our pain. But I don't see them treating their children the same way. Hey, they try to bury me, but don't know I'm a seed. We are seeds existing, flow, but shit with no ID. No one is disposable, we are capable. Rooted like a vegetable and taking back the time to give it to my people. Want everything equal, no government's free throw. We know how to water the roots. Need no politician telling us how to do it. Need no politician telling us how to
Let
do
them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, ay. No one is disposable. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, ay.
Don't they know?
No one is disposable.
Tried to bury us, didn't know we were seeds. Frighten us, expecting us to retreat, recede, fall back. Shut up, sit down. We rooted here and breaking ground. Concrete roses and dandelions. From summertime, we fly the wind with wishes of our family riding, rising high, carry them up to God's ears. Divine beings, we know that God hears. See the system writhing, crying, fighting for its last dying breath. It rather pillage till it's nothing left, and paradigm shift to the left, like sharing wealth will be the kiss of death. Well, I got a news flash for you folks. Our youth are ravenous savages, and they ain't gonna take no more. So kiss your billions to sleep tonight, cause come morning time, we gonna retrieve our birthright.
Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, ay. No one is disposable. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, no. Let them know they can't throw us away, ay. No one is disposable.
Burning bright with hope and love. Sexism, racism they throw at us.
You can throw us into dirt and darkness, but just like a plant, we grow through the soil and towards the light.
Controlling us as if we are property. Though they try to change us, we are unbreakable.
You have forgotten what happens when we unite. Together we are strongest, and we will fight. We need a livable future, and not just for the wealthy.
They look at us with greed-filled eyes, afraid of our strength.
The toxic pollution you dump into the air is like poison and makes us all unhealthy. I'm fighting for my sisters and brothers in Mother Earth. I'm sorry that you have forgotten her worth.
It depends on our people understanding how important our voices and thoughts are. Because unlike before, we refuse to be silenced. I'm fighting for a world where people will be prioritized over profit. A world where we no longer have to fear poverty, immigration, white supremacy, racism, sexism, homophobia, and other truly ugly things in this truly beautiful world. I stand with those who continue to be systematically silenced and whose presence seems to be dismissed. For those who have been here for centuries long before us and continue to be exploited and misrepresented. I stand with the Indigenous leaders who are filled with knowledge but are constantly mistakenly spoken for.
Dallas, I'm gonna put the graphic with the number up just for a minute until we're ready for the next round.
Put this up right here. So folks, I know folks are calling, their phone lines are being overwhelmed. We'll continue to call this number, which is the number to get to Larry Fink at BlackRock. I know people are getting, they're hanging up on folks. They're not taking their messages down, but this is the purpose, is to overwhelm them with our unified voice. We're going to be transitioning into our town hall, which will be facilitated by somebody, by not me. So I just want to give folks a heads up. And I'm just holding up a card with a number. It's so amazing to see like how simple act of calling a number and leaving a message can overwhelm their system. And it does work. It does put pressure on them. They have to, at least the message gets passed on up that people are calling in. So thank you for taking this little action, something simple that everyone can do right now. So, and that's it. Are we good, Roberta?
Yes, thank you, Dallas.
So now I'm going to pass it over to Michelle Chan.
Hey, Michelle, we can hear you.
I'll take that.
There you go.
Sorry, okay, I had my headset on. Hey, thanks everyone for making those calls, and thank you so much to Dallas for doing such a great job in moderating our first hour. I'm Michelle Chan. I'm the Vice President of Programs for Friends of the Earth, and I'm joining from Richmond, California, which is Ohlone territory. So Friends of the Earth is one of the groups, along with Amazon Watch, Sierra Club, Sunrise Project, Divest Invest, and others who've been working to push asset managers like BlackRock to align their business practices with a climate-safe world. And just a reminder that BlackRock's annual shareholder meeting is tomorrow, and it's all online, but we have already submitted questions to Larry Fink and to all of BlackRock's board of directors and management, and we are demanding answers about BlackRock's continued funding of coal, their financing of other fossil fuel projects, their lack of a plan on deforestation, Indigenous, and human rights. And we'll be posting in the chat the questions that we have submitted to BlackRock. And so I'm going to moderate the final section of this People's Assembly, which features elected officials who are leading the efforts against the financing of fossil fuels. And so just a bit of housekeeping. All the participants are encouraged to write any questions that you may have in the Q&A chat box. And we have several folks who have been moderating questions and answering them throughout the event. And when you are doing a Q&A, make sure to drop in your name and your preferred pronouns and where you're calling from. So we'll try to get to some of those questions. So let's get started. Onto the town hall portion of this event. We are really, really honored that we've got a couple town hall presenters that have just joined us on the line. And so on the panel, we have Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island, Congressman Chuy García from Illinois, and New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer. And we also have Diana Best, who is a senior climate finance strategist with the Sunrise Project. And Diana, I'd like to start with you. BlackRock has promised to use their voice and vote to push the companies that they own to be more sustainable. And I'd love it if you could give us all some specifics on how BlackRock's rhetoric is differing from the reality. Diana?
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle. And I just want to take a moment and thank everyone's leadership on this call and the people who've been making calls. It's truly amazing. And it's just been an incredible year on the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign. And it's in part because of all of the work that each of you have been doing. My name is Diana. I work on the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign with a lot of incredible people who are on this call and some who are not. And before we jump into how BlackRock's actually doing on this shareholder season, I want to just take a step back and sort of repeat some of the things that they promised us at the beginning of this year. So BlackRock CEO Larry Fink made a big announcement in January that the company, which had $7 trillion of assets under management, was going to start putting climate at the center of its business. It was going to start increasing the amount of climate engagement it would do with key businesses, and it was going to committed to vote off directors and boards of companies that were seen as not in line with that climate. They also committed to be more transparent with what their engagement with those companies would be, including disclosing how they voted and the rationale for how they voted on key climate votes. So that's what they committed to in January. Now let's take a look at actually how they've done. So of the votes that we've seen this shareholder season where BlackRock has actually followed through and shared how they voted and why, they have failed to support climate resolutions at key companies worldwide. That includes at companies like Shell. That includes at companies like Barclays, which is a massive UK bank. They have failed to support climate resolutions at key Australian oil companies and beyond. So where we know how they voted, they have not supported critical climate resolutions despite saying that they would in January. Now let's look at the other piece of that commitment, actually disclosing how they voted, sharing with people and with their clients and with their shareholders how they're voting at these places and how they're engaging. On that commitment, they have utterly failed. As we just learned, they did not disclose how they voted yesterday at the JP Morgan Chase resolution, at the JP Morgan Chase shareholder meeting, including how they voted on those key climate resolutions, as well as the Lee Raymond vote. This is why these phone calls are so important right now. This is a major problem. If BlackRock doesn't actually disclose how they're voting, it is impossible for everyday people like us, but also BlackRock's own shareholders, their clients, other stakeholders to know actually what BlackRock is doing and what they're saying, whether or not what they say they're going to do actually matches up with their action. So keep making those phone calls. It's been absolutely critical. And while we still have a handful of big votes coming up in the next week, including at companies like Chevron, Exxon, and Total, which is a European oil company, we know that so far to date, BlackRock has really not made good on their promises that they made in January. We've got to keep the pressure going up. We've got to hold them accountable. And right now it feels like BlackRock's just, their commitments on climate are a bunch of hot air. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Diana. And thank you for all that you're doing on the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign. I'd like to turn to Senator Whitehouse, who has joined us. Welcome to the People's Assembly on BlackRock.
Thanks, Michelle. Good to be with you.
Great. I'd like to ask you, where do you think that we need to see more leadership from BlackRock right now?
Well, I think Diana had it exactly right. What we need to see is an alignment of their behavior with their own stated values. It should not be asking too much of a corporation, excuse me, to align its behavior with its own stated values. And that's where the pressure has to come. It, in part, I think, needs to be public pressure, which is why I appreciate so much what everybody's doing here today. And we're also trying to build regulatory pressure into the reporting so that the massive, serious, frequent warnings about financial catastrophe from the climate crisis actually get baked into the way that regulators look at the financial system. I have two specific things that particularly concern me about BlackRock. One is its behavior as a lead shareholder in a company called Marathon Petroleum. The intel that I get out of the climate fight, which I'm pretty deep into, is that Marathon Petroleum is one of the worst behaved members of the fossil fuel industry in terms of trying to screw around with climate obstruction, continue with climate denial. Their fingerprints are all over the breakup of the fuel efficiency standards, and they're really, in my view, up to no good. And it's very hard to shame them because they're not a very public-facing company. But their four big shareholders are BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and JP Morgan. They own 25% of their shares. And if those companies went into that management and said, guys, this lobbying behavior, this sneaky dark money political behavior that you're up to, you're gonna have to knock that off or we're gonna sell out and clear out of this company. That would be a really strong signal to Marathon, which is otherwise gonna be very hard to get any kind of a behavior improvement out of. The other is Exxon. BlackRock, to its credit, with a bunch of other investors, actually forced through the first climate resolution that Exxon couldn't fight off. They agreed to a side deal that got rid of the resolution that they would put together a climate report. Well, they put together the climate report, and in my view, having looked at a lot of corporate reports over a lot of years, the Exxon report is bogus, and it's pretty flagrantly bogus. Well, what does BlackRock do? BlackRock has huge expertise in analyzing corporate filings and making sure that they understand whether a corporate filing is real or not. They invest trillions of dollars based on that expertise. And yet BlackRock never took a hard look at the Exxon report that it provoked. And the Exxon report is still out there with what I consider to be preposterous levels of renewables growth, way predicted too low, preposterous levels of electronic vehicle adoption, way too low, predicted zero adoption of electric trucks and buses, which we already know isn't true, and a predicted explosion in carbon capture and sequestration and reuse, which if they really believe that, they'd be investing in, but their investments don't match their public statement here. So it looks to me like they back calculated the report, picking the numbers that made it look like they'd be able to keep all of their assets and continue to take advantage of them. And BlackRock never called them out on that. Those are two things that matter a lot in my world in the Senate. There are other things where we need to fight with them on. I appreciate everybody doing it. But in a Republican-controlled Senate, we're going to need progress in order to get a serious climate bill done. And I need to focus on those soft spots.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse. It's great that you were able to join us today, and thank you for the leadership that you're showing in the Senate. I'd like to turn to Congressman Garcia next. You know, the Financial Times recently referred to BlackRock as the new vampire squid, you know, meaning that they're everywhere, including in our government. And so I'd like to ask you, Congressman, what kind of accountability should be in place with respect to BlackRock?
You need to unmute, Congressman.
Unmute yourself. Perfect. Thank you.
Here we go. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So during the pandemic, it's really important to take stock of all the suffering that we see around us, and especially in working class and communities of color across the country. So while my neighbors suffer, our government has gone above and beyond for the financial markets, and BlackRock is at the center of that. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager and does contract consulting for governments around the world. The Federal Reserve hired the company to run its bond market programs, and the European Union hired the company to advise banking regulators on climate risk. So BlackRock is becoming more than a shadow bank. It is becoming a shadow government. It is that large. A few weeks ago, I wrote a letter with Representatives Tlaib and Presley to the Fed and Treasury demanding transparency about BlackRock's contract with the Federal Reserve. Some parts of this contract are very problematic. For example, BlackRock employees only have to wait 2 weeks before they can trade off of confidential information that they get from their work with the Fed. But deeper conflicts of interest here are also worrisome. We saw, for example, during the last recession, what happens when too big to fail institutions, financial institutions like BlackRock, write their own rules. If our government relies more and more on BlackRock to keep our economy going, who can hold BlackRock accountable? BlackRock is, of course, a major investor in fossil fuels, and Trump already said he wants to bail out the fossil fuel industry. So if BlackRock is in charge of shaping our economy after the COVID-19 crisis, what will work out for the fossil fuel companies that it's invested in? Or will it work with us to take on climate risk and build a new economy for all? BlackRock is the Trump administration, and the Trump administration might have shared interests, but BlackRock isn't working for it, and it isn't working for you. So I'm excited to be here today with all of you to discuss how we can hold this company accountable.
Thank you so much, Congressman Garcia. Let's turn to Scott Stringer, Comptroller Stringer. Can you tell us about your role as Comptroller for the City of New York and what you see the role of those who manage public funds like yourself being, and to ensure that asset managers' climate policies reflect the long-term interests of the public?
Well, first of all, thank you, Michelle, for having me today. And I do want to recognize it's a pretty big honor to be on with Representative Garcia and Senator Whitehouse, who really led the charge holding corporate America accountable. But in my role as Comptroller, I manage a pension fund of $200 billion. It's the 4th largest in the United States, the 14th largest in the world. It's an elected position, so part of your job is to represent all of your constituents. And when you own shares in a company, you expect that company to have a strong reputation and a strong vision for the value of that company. It is pretty clear to every expert that the climate deniers cannot make an argument for continuing to invest in outdated fossil fuel industry, outdated fracking industry, pipelines, and the like. And part of our job as fiduciaries of this pension fund is to create value in a company. And that's why we have taken direct action with Chase, with JP Morgan, with BlackRock to turn around and say, look, we need people on your board who understand climate risk, who understands fundamental climate change in this country. And that's why working with an amazing coalition from Sunrise to 350.org to New York Communities for Change, we put together a national coalition that actually opposed the nomination of Lee Raymond to the board of JP Morgan Chase, and that was a tremendous victory. He was sidelined by the company, and more importantly, we were able to finally get that concession. What we now have been able to talk about is the fact that his nomination, which was approved, we want to know where BlackRock stood. And I have a good idea where they stood on Lee Raymond, but we now want to hold them accountable because we are winning the climate fight. We are a pension fund that is going through a fossil fuel divestment. And the only way we're going to do this is by creating a national movement on the green economy. That's what Sunrise has been all about, an amazing organization. But we in government have to do our part. And so we're taking some historic action, working with coalition partners. And remember, my first job is to protect the people I represent. So who's that? It's the teacher, the firefighter, the people whose pensions I protect for their family's future. And while I'm doing this work, I also want to make sure that we're protecting their families and their children by creating a greener and safer world and getting rid of the fossil fuels that have polluted our earth and are turning out to be the worst investment you can make.
Thank you so much, Comptroller Stringer. Just a quick follow-up. Can you say a little bit more about what you think that the role of other comptrollers and treasurers, others like yourself, what kind of role do you think can be taken by folks like yourselves to influence the climate policies of other financiers?
Well, I have to tell you, the work on Lee Raymond, for example, was with 11 state treasurers, working with Bill McKibben and 350 and Sunrise. We need coalition partners. And if I could be political for a second, you know, everyone knows that with Donald Trump in the White House and the Republicans in the Senate, we don't have the majority of people like Senator Whitehouse and Chuy García. But I would argue that treasurers and controllers around the country can play a very significant role like state attorney generals, because we can leverage in a fiduciary way the pension funds to do good and protect people's investment. And actually, it's the same thing in my view. I would not be doing my job if I was not questioning the fossil fuel investments these companies are making, or the fossil fuel deniers that continue to be on these boards. And treasurers and controllers can play a major part in climate change in this country.
Thanks so much. Well, I'd like to ask actually everybody on the panel a final question, sort of in a round robin style. And for all the attendees that are joining us over Zoom, you can contribute your answers over the chat as well. And so here's the question. From your perspective, where you sit, how do we get these big financial institutions like BlackRock to change? What's the key? And so since we have some limited time left, I'd like to maybe get, I don't know, a minute or so of, response from all of you, starting with Diana. How do we get these big institutions like BlackRock to change?
I think it's people power. Honestly, we've known for a long time that the oil and gas and coal sectors are one of the worst performing sectors out there. They're not only irresponsible, but they're also harming our climate, and they're not performing well. This is an inevitable transition that we all need to make. And I think people power and demanding that has to keep happening, and we need to get louder and we need to get bigger. Thanks.
Wonderful. Senator Whitehouse, from yourself.
Michelle, I'd make just a slightly different point, which is that in the world that Chuy and I inhabit, the US Congress, there is deafening silence from all of corporate America about climate change. Their lobbying, their trade associations, their electioneering pay literally no attention to climate change. If anything, they're negative on climate change because of the way their trade associations behave. So my favorite example is Coca-Cola and Pepsi, two big public-facing consumer companies who have terrific climate policies, are trying to be sustainable, got great websites, work with the environmental community. Everything they do is good until they get to Congress. And their American Beverage Association, their trade association, doesn't lift a finger on climate. They give money to the US Chamber of Commerce, which has been outed as one of the 2 worst climate obstructors in the country. So those good corporations' presence in Congress is hostile to their stated values. And that's true of pretty much every big corporation in America. That has to change. And so this general question of making these big corporations align their behavior with their own stated values is where we need to continue to bear down on BlackRock, but on all of corporate America.
Thank you so much, Senator Whitehouse. And Congressman Chuy Garcia.
Still on mute, Chuy.
No, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So we know one thing, that BlackRock has money and plenty of it, but we have people. We have to keep organizing around the world to demand that BlackRock and fossil fuel companies take responsibility for their impact on our planet and our communities. That's why we're advancing legislation on the Financial Services Committee in partnership with Senator Whitehouse. When I went to Congress, I went there to hold big corporations accountable, and I'm glad to know that you're fighting alongside with me. More people are joining us every day, and the stakes are higher than ever. If we keep organizing and fighting, we will win.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Scott Stringer.
Look, I think we have an obligation to address the serious threat of climate change in every way we can, whether it's legislative, whether it's through divestment, whether it's holding insurance companies like Liberty Mutual, AIG, and Hathaway to cut their financial ties with the coal industry. We have got to leave this planet safely in the hands, not for us, but for our children. And what motivates me is, having an 8-year-old and a 6.5-year-old, and given COVID and given what they're facing as 2nd and 1st graders. And I don't want them to be in a planet that they cannot breathe freely in. And what a mistake it would be for us as adults and activists and advocates if we let this moment pass. So I don't give a damn what these powerful corporations tell us. I don't care about their profit margin. They have to divest, they have to get out of these fossil fuels before it's too late for everybody. And if people didn't understand that a few months ago, we certainly see what pre-existing health conditions and diabetes and asthma in so many of our communities, so many communities of color who have been stranded against this virus. And that's exactly what pollution does. It creates pre-existing conditions. So I'm proud to be part of this, and we have to build that national movement. I'm really great to be here with all of you.
It's fantastic. And I also wanted to lift up some of the stuff that people put in the chat to this question of how do we get these big institutions like BlackRock to change. We've had some attendees really talk about the inside-outside strategy, which is great because we've had folks, frontline folks here, as well as members of Congress here and investors here. So the inside-outside strategy, we've had people talk about divesting from BlackRock. And BlackRock itself is publicly owned, so divesting shares from BlackRock, as well as maybe divesting as clients and customers of BlackRock. We've had other folks then talk about essentially cutting off the lobbying power and political power that BlackRock has when they show up to Congress. And we've heard about legislation, especially legislation promoting sustainable finance and regulations. So in any case, lots of, there's multiple strategies here, multiple leverage points. And I think that, all of us can lean in at this moment. I just wanted to send a big thank you to all the speakers that joined us today and all the participants, both in this panel and the one before this. We're going to be sending up an email to follow up with all the resources that have been shared throughout the event, including this call, which has been recorded. And so before we wrap up the call, I just wanted to encourage everybody to continue to call on BlackRock to demand more transparency, more accountability, more sustainability. And also between today and tomorrow being the shareholder meeting, of course, we invite you to send a postcard to BlackRock and remind them that until BlackRock takes action, all of their talk is just hot air. And so we're going to be putting into the chat a link to BlackRock's Big Problem. They've got a place where you can send a postcard. So just check that out. And then also our friends at Code Pink are also hosting an online rally tomorrow during BlackRock's AGM. And so you can definitely think about joining them. We're going to be putting the registration for that online rally in the chat right now. And that's again hosted by Code Pink. And just wanted to thank everyone again who has joined us, everyone who put this panel together, moderated, tech, etc. Thanks everyone for your continued efforts, and have a really good day. Keep up the fight and stay healthy, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
This is so great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Onward. We can do this.
Okay, I'm closing the link now. Thank you, everyone. Take good care. Continue to make calls, send your postcards. Thank you.